John, how's it going, man? Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Really, it's a pleasure to be on this with you.
Yeah, listen, I'm so excited because I've known you for quite a bit of time, but I don't actually know you, if you know what I mean. Like we knew of each other and we hang out a little bit, but I was never on the court with you. I never saw you coach, and that's why I know you're a very good coach because you're producing good players, of high level. So that's why I was very curious to talk to you about today, about your philosophy, about your story. And maybe we start with how it all started for you. How did you get into coaching?
Yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting story for me personally because a lot of people assume that I played a lot of tennis when I was younger, which I didn't,
Mm.
or that I competed at a high level, excuse me, which I also didn't do. And oh, there goes the cat.
Oh, nice.
Um, but I ultimately, like, I never planned on being a tennis coach. It was something that I never thought of. It never really interested me. And it happened really by total coincidence that I was doing something that I wasn't really fulfilled in. I was working as a real estate agent in Toronto, which was like good, but not great. And was just like looking for something to do. And I was really gearing up. I really wanted to like leave the country and go just like totally shake things up and do something different. And fell into, I taught like a little bit of tennis and ended up at the Fitness Institute filling in for a couple weeks at the Toronto Tennis Academy, which I know
Mm.
you kind of, I feel like your beginnings kind of started in a similar way with the Toronto Tennis Academy as well.
Very similar, yeah.
Yeah,
Branko, obviously Branko.
of
So he
course.
was he was on a honeymoon, and that's how I got my spot at TTA at
Yeah.
that time, just for like a couple of weeks, like 3 weeks, I believe that was.
Yeah, you just had to wait for somebody to get married and yeah.
Exactly.
So I think my start was a little bit more desperate because I mean you have a playing background and I think you could walk on the court and be pretty impressive. And I was sure that the week that I got called in, it was a January, and I don't know, maybe it was like 2010, 2011, somewhere around there. And I think like three of the four coaches there got the flu, so they just didn't have anybody. And I'm sure that I was not one of the first 10 phone calls that went out.
Mm.
I'm sure. But as you know, finding replacement coaches of quality in the middle of the winter is a hard thing to do in the city. So
Yes.
um, one way or another, I ended up getting a call, and I just remember being so blown away watching kids play at a level that I didn't know was possible for kids to play at,
Mm.
and to see coaches that were so skillful and competent, and I just totally felt like outclassed, but also um, just had like an instant admiration for what was happening there.
Mm.
And I had never seen an academy before, um, so to know that this thing that was 5 minutes from my house in a bubble in a parking garage was happening like right under my nose was like
Mm.
very surreal.
What
So
grabbed your attention? Like you were saying, you were fascinated. Like what was the environment like?
it just seemed like really intense. Like everybody was trying really hard. I mean, the coaches and the players and the kids. And like the first group I went into would have been like 7, 8, 9, 10-year olds,
Mm.
and just seeing how much they cared and how much like they wanted to perform.
Mm.
And it's like like we were in a bubble in a parking garage. Like nobody was watching. So it just seemed very strange to me. Like, what is all this for? Like, why are they doing this? Like, because I hadn't been to an academy. I'd never been to a provincials in my life.
Mm.
So it was just it really caught my eye, and I was really impressed with the quality of play
Mm.
by these kids. Because even at that time, I would say I really would have struggled to play against some of like the 10 or 11-year olds at that time.
Mm.
So that's
Okay.
kind of where it started. And
Yeah,
after
yeah.
I
Continue.
filled in for that week, uh, I spoke to Peter, who one of the leaders and founders of the Toronto Tennis Academy, and I just said, "Hey, can I just come like hang out? Can I come volunteer?" Because working in real estate, I had the flexibility to just say like I can come from 4 to 6 Monday to
Yeah.
Friday. It doesn't cost me anything. I don't have to answer to anyone. And so I did, and I did for as I recall, it was like 6 or 7 weeks where I just showed up every day, and I just was a fly on the wall,
Mm.
and I would watch the coaches demonstrate and the way they would speak to players, and I just thought, at that time there was like 1 in 60 people in Toronto had a real estate license in that
Wow.
year. I don't know what it is now. I think it's more.
Yeah.
And I
It's
just
got to be
thought,
more.
oh, we got another visitor.
Now
I
there's two
just
of you.
thought that, and I still largely feel like that. So maybe I'm going to get some heat for this, but it doesn't take, it's hard to really separate yourself as like a great real estate agent.
Mm.
Like, how do you measure that? It's like, well, do you earn more money? It's like, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're better than anyone else. I just didn't think like the job was that unique for me, and it was competitive, but for the wrong reasons that didn't really leave me fulfilled. So in
Mm.
tennis, I just saw that, wow, like this is something I'd really like to put myself into. That I think I could be like really great at this if I just apply myself to this.
Mm.
Um, so after that, like 6 or 7 weeks, Peter said, "Hey, like, what are you doing this summer? Like, you want a job?" And I just said, "Yeah, like, let's do it." I
Nice.
didn't ask what it was. I didn't ask what it paid. It was just, let's do it. And that's where things kind of took off. Every year after that, there was more opportunities opening up, and like I never thought anything would happen with me in tennis. So to work in an academy was like I made it. I'm at the highest level that
That's
I
it.
can achieve in tennis. And then, to working with like a player that was going to try and qualify for provincials, it's like I made it. It's like I got this new level, or like get your first player in provincials, or work with a provincial training group. Like I never thought these things would happen. So everything that happened, I just felt really grateful for the opportunity and the experience to be able to do things.
Yeah. And then can you tell a little bit more about what happened after?
Yeah. Do you mean like the stuff that happened with Matt?
Yeah, exactly. Because because you went from, just for everybody listening and maybe not knowing your story, so you went from working for the academy and obviously working with a lot of really good players from TTA. Um, so you went from that to working with one player,
Yeah.
which is like, I'm very curious to talk about that as well, because I've never had that experience working with
Hmm.
one player for such a long time. So you went from, sorry, we'll get things
Yeah.
in order here, but you worked in academy and then you basically separated yourself and you worked with one player for an extended amount of time. So can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that process, how it happened, and then we'll get into the actual experience.
Sure. Yeah. So just to set the stage for how that happened was, uh, I think having traveled on the road with other coaches that have done similar things, that a lot of them kind of grew up having an experience like that, so it wasn't that foreign to them. But I think it took me many years to feel like I was I was qualified and I was able to really champion a player like that. So it was really important. Like the years I spent working in the provincial training groups, um, under and with really excellent coaches, was like really important for me to really make sure that my philosophies became
Mm.
more my own and were more tested with other players. So by the time I don't know, it might have been like 7 or 8 years into um, my coaching career, and I was like really full on. As you know, I was at tournaments at least 3 out of 4 weekends a month. I was working
Yeah.
with provincial groups. I was heavily involved in certification, both taking courses and delivering courses
Mm.
for the province and the country. And um, we had a cohort of kids that grew up, and they got to the point where they kind of left our part of the academy and they went to the older academy. We'll just say it's still the Toronto Tennis Academy, but they moved clubs. I'm just generalizing for anybody that doesn't know how this academy works. And so we had basically 10 players that all left at the same time. And we also moved clubs at that time. We went from Fitness Institute, which is now the Supreme Court, to Mayfair. And I didn't have any, students, which was fine because I'd been very busy for very long. And so we're starting to build the program out. We've got 7 courts. We have literally 0 kids. And we're doing tryouts. And one of the kids was this kid, Matt, or Matthew. I always called him Matt. I still do. And I remember getting an email from Peter. And Peter, it was just at the end of the summer. He was going to go on for vacation for a week or 2, totally deserving of that. And he was like, John, can you just look after this assessment? I was like, yeah, of course. I'll take him. Took him down to Leaside. And that was really the start. That was my first interaction with Matt. I met his dad and him, and Matt was the worst player I've ever assessed that had aspirations of doing what he said he had done.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, you know the feeling.
Yes.
And it was kind of new for me because I just worked with this cohort of kids for 5 or 6 years, and it's and as you know, 3 of them ended up in the national center where you were working.
Yeah.
So you know exactly what the caliber of the player was. And then to go to backwards a little bit, I have a dad telling me how good his kid is, and he's not good. And the dad was like, I really wanted Peter to do this because Peter's the guy. Who are you? And so I feel like I'd barely earned enough of maybe a reputation or experience at that point to feel okay, well, I think I could champion something entirely on my own from the beginning. And as soon as we did the assessment, Vic, the dad, he said, John, we like you. We want to work with you. And that was really the beginning of the end from that point on. And we just really started working heavily, might have been a week or 2 later.
So you as in work with you within the academy?
Within the academy, but okay. I mean, we were doing 4 to 6 privates a week. And he was doing 2 or 3 groups a week that I was also leading those groups. Yeah. So within the academy, but when you work in an academy, there's players that you look after because I don't mean this in a selfish way, but there's players that it's your responsibility to look after.
Oh, 100%.
And it's even if we work together, that we might collaborate with some players, or if I'm away or busy doing something, it's hey, Bogdan, can you help me out with this player? Maybe we're working on a certain theme and I think you're really good at that skill, or maybe I'm just away. It's hey, can you look after them? But it's ultimately they'd still be my, and I don't mean my player, I have ownership because I don't feel like that, but ultimately it falls on me to make sure that I'm responsible for getting them to where they need to go.
Yeah, 100%. And the kid also feels like that. I'm sure.
For sure. And I think even in an academy, when we had 100 players in the academy at Mayfair very quickly, I felt responsible for the program as a whole, but ultimately there might have been 6 to 8 players at a time where I was their coach, and everything started and kind of ended with my vision of what was going to happen with them.
Mm-hmm. What's your vision? How do you look at somebody and see, okay, this is what I need to work on because this player needs to be there in 5 years or 2 years? What's your structure, I guess, to identify the priorities for that player?
Yeah. I think it depends really on the individual player, first of all, that I don't have a cookie cutter approach.
Damn it.
Yeah, sorry. I wish I had the secret sauce, but I don't. And I wish I had some secret sauce. But everybody's so different in what they want. And I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at listening to what people say they want and actually watching their actions to determine if that's actually true.
Yeah.
Ultimately, though, my process is I'm highly metric driven and analytical. In the back end, and in the front end, I'd say I'm pretty open and just trying to help players' behaviors and instincts like drive the ship both on and off the court. So what I mean by that is I'm totally happy to have like a conversation with a player about what they want to do and share stories and figure out how we can get their feelings to help make them be the best player they can be, especially in higher pressure moments. But behind the scenes, I've got notebooks and notebooks filled with match charting and stats. And that stuff is more for me to make sure that I'm being accountable to myself and the player, that I'm actually making a difference. Because I think there's a big issue in coaching that there's a lot of things that like, we work on, but it doesn't improve performance. And I think if you don't, for me, it's like if I don't have a reference point, if I don't know where we started and I can't measure it, then I don't actually know if I did a better job or not.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to be like, well, I think we're getting better. I think we're improving. I feel like you did a good job today. Like these things don't matter much for me.
What do they mean really? Right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we all say that. Like I say that as well. But in the back of my mind, like I know what I'm saying this for. Like, for example, if the kid gives like a truly great effort and they're super intense and they're running for every ball and they're asking questions, like in the practice, and I feel they're engaged and they really want that practice, then I would say good job. And
right.
Yes, it's 2 words, but I put so much more behind it.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Like, so
I know what you mean.
So I think it's important to really like not just, and to constantly be like aware of that by you saying good job, what does that mean to you? Is it good job because that's just like, hey, how's it going? Like, hey, like, just like automated sentences that we just say at the end of the practice? Or is it something bigger that we put behind those words? So I think it's important to always remember that. I'm just saying it as a reminder to myself.
Yeah,
as I'm going to go on court later today.
Yeah, it's a constant reminder. I think it's worthwhile as well, because I think I fall into that as well at times, that I might just say something that seems a little bit too much like a blanket statement.
Yeah. Do you feel like, because you mentioned something important, that we often work on things that don't matter, they don't improve performance? Sorry, like to paraphrase you. They don't improve performance. How do you personally measure performance?
Well, we'd have to be more specific about what element of performance we're talking about.
So let's say we take a forehand, for example.
Sure.
How would you rate improvement of that forehand?
Okay, so first of all, I'd want to see it in a match. So not a practice forehand. You still there, Bogdan?
Sorry, yeah, you broke up for a second. Yeah, we're good. I think we're back on. Yeah.
So I always like analyzing things in a match, because I think that's the only really relevant time of it happening. And I think if practice looks like the match, then we can kind of assume that there's like a connection there. But I want to analyze something in a match, so then I would say, well, what type of forehand are we talking about, Bogdan? Is it an offensive forehand, or a neutral one, or a defensive forehand?
Let's say it's a neutral forehand, the quality of the neutral forehand.
Okay. And is this when the player is like having some movement or not?
Like some movement, like receiving a quality shot, let's say.
Yeah. So then I'd work it backwards from there and figure out, the first thing is like, do they have the right idea? Is the intention correct? So first you have to watch enough points to have a sample size. At least to me, I'm not saying that. This is just how I would approach it. That I'd want to see enough points to know that what I suspect is happening or what is actually happening, I can actually prove.
Yeah.
So I had an opportunity to work with a player over the summer who is like towards the end of their junior career and are trying to get into some more prestigious US schools. And I said, okay, well, I'm not really going to be available to see your matches, but if you record them, I'll watch them. And then I can do the stat keeping and the charting that I would normally do. And so a match came back and they said, yeah, I feel like I did a really good job of pulling my opponent wide with my forehand cross. So it kind of speaks to what you're talking about. And then I was trying to get to the open court on their backhand, but it wasn't happening. It was a righty against a righty. And I watched the video, and how many of the forehands broke the singles line going cross court? I'll give you a big guess, Bogdan.
Like 1?
0.
0. Okay, even
0. Like literally 0. So in watching this, I said, okay, well, your intention was good, so that's good. But your perception of what's happening, like you're delusional because it's not happening. And then your execution is also not very good because you're not actually doing the thing that you meant to do, even though it's the right course of action. So then it's like very simple. It's like, well, player or Bogdan, it's like, can you make the ball do this? And if you can make the ball do that, then great. We've improved performance because anything greater than 0 is an improvement.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So that was like an easier example.
So the question for you is like, was the kid aware that what the ball should be doing?
They were aware. And in fact, it was interesting because I felt like this player had so much coaching that they had all the right answers. If you talk to the player, you know exactly what you think. Oh my gosh, this player's like fantastic. They know exactly what to do.
Yeah, I've coached players like that. Yeah, like they're ready to write their own tennis book.
I call these textbook players. They they'd pass if tennis was a paper exam, they would ace it.
Yeah, exactly.
These are like high achieving like academic students. Like they're fantastic at regurgitating knowledge, but it's like for them answering the question correctly is as much of a success at doing it correctly. So when you're talking about a performer, it's like, well, you'd actually want the player that has no idea what they're doing, but like their instincts are so good that it's like they just like have an innate ability to just win. They just can figure out. It's like, well, what'd you do? Like, I don't know. I just played better.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's important that you brought up, and I'm glad you did that. I kind of baited you almost like to lead us there.
You got me.
I got you, because in the end, what happens in the match, that's what matters, for a performance player. And how we get there, it's really personally fascinates me, because there's no one way. Of course, there are certain standards and ways, like coaching techniques for us to improve a player. But essentially, it doesn't really matter as long as performance of that player improves fast enough so that he can, stay ahead of the game or on top of the game.
Yeah.
So I'm just like rambling a little bit, but it just fascinates me that there's so many different things we can do.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Like, in general, it's just like, I know it's a basic thing, and people listening probably like, oh, come on, Bogdan, seriously, like you've been around long enough to know that that's the way. But I'm just still to this day, I'm fascinated that, like there is no just like a player can go to John, to Bogdan, to Al, to RF, to all these Dean, to all these great coaches. I'm missing a bunch, and they can get completely different result, but still can get better.
Right.
Which is like, wow.
Yeah.
It's.
I think that's what kind of keeps us fresh, or at least me fresh, is like, I love that every student is a different challenge.
Yeah. yeah, I think reading your player, it becomes the older I get, like I really spend a lot of time, and I spoke about it with Al a little bit, um, a lot of time on my communication to improve my communication,
Mm-hmm.
and also understanding the player, right? Because if you know who you're working with, like, and again, we've talked about it for many years, during certifications, coaching certifications, but really understanding your player,
Mm-hmm.
not like, but like they have weaker backhand, or they like Disney move. No, no, no. But like really, like what
Yeah.
drives them.
I want
Like
to interrupt you
finding
there.
that.
I have a question
Yeah.
for you there, Bogdan.
Oh.
Um,
Oh.
First though,
Okay.
I
Okay.
I was actually hanging out with Al 2 weekends ago, and we
Okay.
were talking about your podcast and about you. Um, all the bad stuff I can't say on a podcast. No, I'm just kidding. Um, but I was just saying, yeah, I'm like really excited to go talk to Bogdan, and we were away. We were actually celebrating his better half's birthday,
Nice.
and we were talking about, and I was just saying, like, I think it's great that you're doing these, and I was so excited to be asked to come on.
Mm.
But I actually didn't listen to any yet because I felt like I just wanted the experience of doing this
Yeah.
with you without
Yeah.
any idea of what you've been talking about with other people.
Yeah. What's gonna happen?
Yeah. So that was really cool. What were we talking about right before? I was going to
Well,
interrupt you with a question.
we were talking about performance, and how I'm thinking about communication and ways to, like understand your player better, like faster to
Okay. Yeah.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it goes a little bit more than just knowing like their weaknesses and their strengths, and like
Yeah.
that's kind of like the basic of it, right? But really to understand their mindset, and really understand what drives them, and how can you, with like few words, change their behavior from, I don't want to be here, for example, on a particular day, to, okay, coach, let's go. Let's, like, I got this. Let's go.
Yeah. So
So
what do
to
you do
me,
to get to know your players more on that level?
I constantly ask them questions. Like I'm a coach that listens, like in terms of, like, I'm curious about everything. So I asked them, like, what do they like? What do they listen to? Like, what did they do on the weekend? I listen to them talk, and like psychologically, you always pick up things from someone's answers, from someone's words. So words that would be coming most often, that's what matters to them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it depends. Like sometimes you can see what a kid would answer to you, in which way. Are they excited, to share this
Right.
element of their, like of their life, or they don't want to talk about it? Then that's fine, you leave it then. And as you talk, as you work with them on the court, obviously it's not like you you talk to them all the time, but you always like give them feedback. You see how they react to this, how do they react to another type of feedback, and you kind of come up with a way that works better specifically for that player. With some it's humor, with some it's more being a little bit more strict, with some it's just like saying, hey, like figure this out, I know you can do it, just giving them a little bit more confidence in that way. So it like you say, it really depends on the player in front of you, but it's really fascinating for me. There's so many ways, and you can get better in so many different ways to get your coaching on another level. So
And do you do
that's
anything
what,
off court
off court I
to get
like
to know
doing.
players more on a different level?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Like I'm a big proponent, and I learned this from like Andrew Labelle, my mentor, my former boss, head coach of the provincial training center in Toronto. where I worked for 4 years, he would organize a lot of off-court activities. And I really took that, and I'm trying to bring that, and I'm not trying, I am bringing this to the academies where I was at Mayfair. I organized some stuff, again, free of charge, like just, hey, let's go and let's watch a movie and let's order pizza and let's just hang out and talk, or let's go and do fitness, or let's, just play touch games all day, like for like 2 hours, whatever. Just like do something like fun, something like not necessarily super serious. Sometimes it's serious, but I'm a big believer. Like just last week we played soccer. I booked off 3 courts, no members, nobody, just like kids, soccer, loud music, yelling, and it just bonds you a little bit. Like, first of all, it's for kids to to bond with one another. It's like, hey, like we not only we play tennis together, but we play soccer. So I'm a huge believer in these activities because it lets you, again, understand your player from another side, like who's more competitive, who's not, like who needs this, who needs that. So it just like opens up these huge opportunities for you to help your players in a ways that you maybe would never think about before.
Yeah. And I suspected that you were doing things like this because I know you get glimpses of it on your Instagram. You'll see a story where your guys are playing some fun game.
Yeah.
But then I figured there was more, and I was curious to know if that happened.
Yeah. So sometimes I just I'm on my way to soccer, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna video, I'm gonna post everything, and then I'm coming in, and I just forget about everything. Okay, guys, let's go. Okay, and it's just like, man. So if it wasn't for like some parents who videotaped the soccer, I wouldn't have any footage, which I'll post later.
I don't actually think it's a bad thing either, because it's not really like for us as outsiders. It's like it's an experience for you to bring people together.
100%. But I just want to also show to others, like I have no secrets, like in terms of like I'm very open. Like if you ask me any question or anybody ask me I'm just gonna say it, because I think everybody can benefit from it. If somebody sees that I'm doing like a soccer on Saturday, whether it's a coach, parent, or I just want them to think, oh, that's pretty cool, or what the hell is he doing? I don't care.
Yeah.
But but I think it doesn't hurt for everybody.
Oh, yeah, no, I wasn't saying that it does.
Yeah. No, but it's like when I'm okay, I'll reverse it a little bit. So when I'm looking at other academies, what they do and what they post on Instagram, I'm learning from that.
Of course.
In a way that, oh wow, that's really cool what they're doing. I want to do that too. And I bring that to my place.
Yeah.
And I hope, because I'm all about learning, sharing, getting better together, and I'm very passionate about this. So if just the thought about that, it may help like one person, again, whether it's a coach, whether it's a parent, whether it's a player, then I'm really stoked about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how my brain works,
Yeah.
And that's why I'm doing these conversations, with all you guys, because we have so many great people in Canada, so many good professionals, like really good professionals that have developed players that are passionate about our sport, and we don't know them much. Do you know what I mean? Like
I know what you mean. And
how often do we get a chance to have a conversation with John Kudjerski? How often do we get a chance to talk to Al Miller? How often do we get a chance to talk to Severin Tamborera, who was on the show as well? Like, you don't get these opportunities, but I want to create this platform where you listen to their opinion, to their stories, and this is the country we live in. Like, we need to know our pros, like our specialists in the industry.
I think it's so cool what you're doing, and that was actually the one question I had for you: is why are you doing this? Because it seems obvious, but I thought maybe, it's just a question worth asking.
Yeah, it's always because again, it doesn't. It's not for income, obviously. You know, like there's no sponsors. There's no like it doesn't get me anything of value like directly. Of course, it's a little bit of PR. Let's be honest here. Like, you know, it's a little bit of hold on a second.
Oh, what you got there?
Right. So it's a little bit of this, but at the same, like the core of it is what I talked about before. That's the main reason that makes me do it. Yeah.
This reminds me, I was introduced to this social group, I'll call it.
Okay.
It's a group called Stories We Don't Tell.
Okay.
And is a couple people, and they invite. It's like kind of just like it's like a network, but it's like an in-person network, and somebody will host a get together, and they'll say we have space for 40 people, and so you can sign up for this thing, and there'll be 4 or 5 speakers, and speaker 1 will be Bogdan, and you'll share a story about your life that to a room of a couple people you know and a bunch of strangers, and is always called Stories We Don't Tell, and people just share just well-crafted stories about their life, and they would be like really intimate and really special. And I went to quite a few of these events and always found that like 2 or 3 or 4 out of the 5 of them would like really strike me as like really profound. Where that even though I had never known this person before, it's like, wow, I felt parts of the story I could really relate to, or I could really empathize with. And I think what you're doing here at Cataloguing, for lack of a better word, a group of coaches across a nation, I think it's a great idea. And I think it's really important because we don't get to spend enough time with each other as coaches. And I think that players could benefit from learning some things from other coaches as well. As you said, maybe they just take one thing away from somebody they normally wouldn't be in front of, and like that's enough, and that's really valuable.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Because, you know, maybe now that you say that, it makes me think that when I was younger and just like starting out as a coach, I would be at the NYTA, and that's where I met Al Miller, and we talked again about it on his interview. And
I'm going to listen after this.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go back and listen to all of them.
If I don't know if you have time, it's like 2 hours. It's my longest so far. We were just like
challenge accepted.
Yeah, yeah. So let me know what you think after.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's where I met him, and a lot of learning. We were joking about it, like that the best certification is in the bar. You know, when when you actually go with coaches and talk and like drink and just like relax and talk tennis. And so that's where my first like 2 years were. Like my learn. Of course, a lot of learning happened on court, like but there was like this sense of unity. I don't know if I'm choosing the right word, like friendship, camaraderie, where you would like spend some time on the court and you would actually want to go out with people who you work with, you know, and just continue talk tennis, continue talk work, continue like, you know, just like discussing things, how can they get better? And then when I started working for Tennis Canada, that format stayed, but it expanded internationally. Because when you go to a tournament, and you know this as well, you go to a tournament and you meet people from Brazil, from Germany, from Japan, and then you talk to them and you just share a meal and you ask them, hey, so how are you doing? It's pretty much what we're doing right now. Like, hey, John, what are you doing? Like,
except the
to
food's
get your
better.
players better. Except the food is a little bit better. It's the conversation is a little bit more real, you know. But that's how I learned a ton as well. And maybe I'm missing it right now with everything that's happened in our world and just in general with how busy things are, you know. And like it takes me 1 hour to get to work. Whoa. You know, like it's like like a little less, but like with everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm just saying that I'm missing conversations like this. So maybe it's also like subconsciously that's my way of recreating what we used to have.
Yeah. Well, I feel like every time we get together, we have a great conversation.
Oh, 100% over that jerk chicken place near your house.
That's right. So good.
that was wow.
Even if
that
I think
place. Sorry, that
Yeah.
place was wow.
Chris Jerk
Like,
in Scarborough, there's a plug.
Oh my God, that's like, well, first of all, you told everybody the neighborhood you live in, but
That's fine. I'm an open book
all your
too.
to all your stalkers. But anyway, that place was such a big discovery, and man, I came back like multiple times after
Nice.
you showed me. I took my girlfriend there.
Nice.
And she was like, "Oh my God, this chicken is ridiculous."
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely mind blowing. But listen, from chickens and all that, I appreciate all the kind words. I want to kind of go back and talk about John a little bit. So you worked with Matt, with Matthew Sismarek,
Yeah.
to be specific.
Yeah.
40 minutes in, we're dropping a name finally.
Yeah.
Reveal, make a big reveal. So you worked with him alone for how many years? Just like you and him, that's it, no academy.
I mean, it never really felt alone, but maybe it was like 2 or 3 years. We were together for 5 years in total.
Okay. So how was it? I just so you know where I'm coming from, and I've always worked with the group of players. Like when I was at the NYTA, at TTA, there was, like academies, there's always like a group of people that you work with,
Right.
coaches and players. When I went to work to NYTA, same idea, it's academy. When I went to work for Tennis Canada, it's the same idea. Like
Right.
the center I was in, like we had a head coach, we had at the beginning we had Dean and Bruno, more senior coaches, in charge of men, like girls tennis, boys tennis at the center, and I was just like an assistant coach in the beginning.
Right.
So I would always have like someone above me, and I would always have like few players that I would be in charge of eventually. But I wouldn't. I traveled. I believe I traveled only once. No, I traveled not once. Sorry, I traveled few times with one player to tournaments. So I have a little bit of that experience that you had, but I have no idea how it's like to work day in and day out and travel and deal with everything that you have to deal with. And I really want you to talk about it because you're working with one player.
Yeah.
Because it's tough mentally.
I have an idea for you as well. That you might consider reaching out to Matt and do a podcast with him and get his take, because I'd be curious as well.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to share from my perspective.
Yeah. And then we'll compare. We'll make a video. Like
Yeah. I knew from the beginning when the idea was first posed to me, which was very early in Matt and I working together, that this was something that the family was interested in. I knew that these opportunities are very rare, especially in Canada, because the only one that had ever really done this before was Adriana with Denis Shapovalov. So I knew that there was a little bit of some shoes to fill there, or some expectations of like, well, if you're going to do this, you better do this really well.
Dean with Peter.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
But like
I'm,
the list,
I'm sure we're forgetting somebody. Yeah.
I mean, the list is very small though.
Yeah.
It's very small.
Yeah.
And so I knew that there is, again, this might be maybe my one opportunity to do something like this, where I could really put all of myself into one player.
Mm.
And I felt really ready for that. I think after working like an average of like 330 days a year for years and years on end, I was like ready to just say, okay, I'm just going to put all that in one person and see how much we can challenge each other, not against each other, but to really pursue the same goal. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, certain things become better when you have one player. You can become hyper focused. You don't miss out on any kind of priorities. Um, but also that same like tunnel vision also prevents you from seeing broader pictures as well. So I felt like that was going to be an issue, at least for me, is like I kind of need stimulus. And I think how I chose to solve that is I tried to get Matt and I into many different training environments where we didn't just have a routine that was always the same.
Mm.
So
Can you elaborate on that?
absolutely. So we started working together completely privately earlier, like really early in the pandemic. And through one of the lockdowns, what we didn't have access to hitting with a lot of players because there's a lot of fear about what was happening. There's a lot of rules and regulations about where you could train in Ontario, but there wasn't in British Columbia. So the first summer of the pandemic, we went out to BC, him and I,
Mm.
and we stayed at my really good friends in Squamish, which if you know me, you know I love Squamish.
Yes.
And we stayed at my friend's house, which was like super kind of him. He had 2 extra rooms, so Matt had a
How
room and I
convenient.
had a room. And there was a tennis court, a public tennis court. Um, it was a 4-minute walk from his house.
Wow.
And so I just said, my friend had said, "Is it cool if we come out?" I said, "Absolutely." So I ordered a case of balls there, and we brought the portable stringer, and we did
Wow.
that. And while we were doing that, we also collaborated with other coaches that were there. So I don't know if you've talked to Zach Olen yet on the
Not yet,
podcast.
but he's on my list for
All
sure.
right, good, because
For sure.
I love talking to that guy. He's
Mm.
unbelievable. What a resource. What a gem.
Yeah.
So I did some collaborating with Zach where we'd go and we jumped into their academy and basically made the deal like, hey, like Matt's going to come and train with you guys. He'll do whatever you ask him to do,
Mm.
and I will come coach for free, and you'll take Matt, and we'll we're going to continue to work. And I thought it was just great to be able to hear some different voices
Yeah.
and to be around different players and to see some different like training styles. But like ultimately, it's just circling back to like, your priorities are your priorities. How we're trying to improve Matt's performance is still true. We were still trying to do that, but it just gave a different look and a different lens. And even a couple times, like Zach and I, uh, Zach's the coach. He was working with a player. I think he had just finished 4th or top 4 in under 12 nationals, and Matt was 12 at the time, I think, or 13. And so
Mm.
we ended up like switching for a couple lessons where I taught Zach's player and Zach taught Matt. And I just said,
Mm.
hey, are these some of the things I'm like
Nice.
working on? And
It's pretty cool.
yeah, and I really value those opportunities because as much as I think I can get the job done, it's like, well, one issue I was having with was like Matt's first serve return. And I just remember asking like every coach I could think of that I really like value their opinion. And it said, hey, I need help with this because I feel
Mm.
like um, there's strength in numbers, and I'm certainly not good at everything. And if I had to say I'm good at anything, it would be finding the right people and connecting the dots. Like I think
Mm.
that's really what I'm good at. Um, and some of the coaching stuff I'm okay at too.
But it shows your humility that you're very open and you put your player first. I think that's
Yeah.
what's important. Yeah.
Yeah. So we did that. We would do things like that where it's like, okay, we're going to go train at Ace Burlington with Mike Hall and Brandon for a couple weeks.
Mm.
We're going to mix it up. Where Matt was invited to the National Center where it's like, okay, he's going to be around like great coaches and some other great players. And that opened up a lot of opportunities where he really didn't hit with me very much, which was probably for the best.
Mm.
Although I will say, during the pandemic, we started a match counter, him against I, because often it would be the two of us if it was just difficult to get courts or find other players for a variety of reasons. And I will say publicly that I am still up 15-14 matches against Matthew
There you go.
Cisneric. So
take that, Matthew.
yeah.
If you're ever listening to this.
Yeah. So yeah, we just really trying to find different coaches in different environments to put you in, to make sure that nothing gets stale. I always tried to be proactive and get ahead of things before things ever felt like it just became too routine.
Man, like, this is so paramount. And for you to say that, I mean, that makes sense that, you know, you spend so much time with him, like one-on-one, working one-on-one. And that's probably, you know, it lasted that much, because it's, for me personally, I cannot imagine working with a player. Like, not that I can't do it, but for me, it's very, very tough job to be with one person for so much time during the day.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, especially if it's a junior. I remember my tours with kids, and again, this is where you have to make sure that you're gelling with that person really well, and you have the same kind of, you know, you're getting along really well. But sometimes it doesn't work like this. Even with the player, listen, I don't care how good your relationship is, you need space from one another. You need just your own personal time to just do your own shit, pretty much. And yeah, I commend you for what you did and where you took Matthew, honestly, because it's just an incredible amount of work, and from your end to organize all of this, you know, and that's the only way when you're working one-on-one like this. I find you have to make it fresh. You have to make it variable. You have to make it interesting. You have to change your environments. You cannot do the same thing. Like, it's gonna, the kid will hate tennis. You will hate tennis. At least in my opinion. I'm sure there's coaches right now listening. Like, I did it without that, and I was successful. So again, it just comes back to what we talked about earlier.
And I think it depends on your upbringing too. Like I said in the beginning, I don't have a high level tennis background at all. Nobody in my family does. So for me to like push really hard to do it day in and day out, like it had to have an element of fun to it. I had to like enjoy like the struggle and the process to the most that I could. And I felt like Matt had to do that too. And that's just me being biased in projecting how I felt towards somebody else. But I just don't think it's within me to be the like crack a whip all day and be like, I'm above you, so you're just going to do what I say.
Yeah, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, it does on some level, but that's...
I'm sure for some coach and some player, like I'm a really big believer in like there's like a chemistry, like there's better coaches for certain players, like there's just better matchups, and I think, you know, as I've gotten older, I feel like I can connect with more people, but I think ultimately, like sometimes like I'm in front of somebody and like I'm just like not the right person for you.
Yeah.
Like, I know what your problems are. Like, I know how I could fix it, but like not in a way that's really going to resonate with you. Like, I'm not for you.
Yeah. Then this is very professional as well of you to say that. Yeah. It's like a good lawyer when they take a case, only the case that they believe they can win. So similar to what you said, it's like, I know it's not going to be a successful relationship. Let's not waste half a year for for you, for me. Let's just here's a guy for you. I could recommend you somebody that's going to be good for you, but that's not going to be me.
Yeah, and I'll share that the first day, going back to the first day I met Matt when we did our assessment at Leaside Tennis Club, and truly, like, I thought he was extremely weak. Even at 10 years old, I thought he was extremely weak. I remember balls double bouncing, like the second bounce would be a few feet in front of the baseline and he wouldn't touch it. Like, not because he didn't want to, he just like couldn't see it, couldn't get there.
Okay.
And I was just like, wow, like it's a miracle you're still holding a racket.
Mm.
But I remember we did at the end, we did like a practice game, like up to 7 points or something. I think it was probably 7 because, you know, every tennis coach plays to 7.
For some
So,
odd reason,
yeah.
right?
Bogdan, today at practice, you're playing to 8
8. That's it.
or 6, but not 7.
Yeah.
And I remember it, and I beat him, and it wasn't that I was trying to beat him, but it was really hard not to lose to somebody that, you know, couldn't move around the court and like hit 3 balls in the court.
Mm.
And I remember he looked at me in the eye and he said, "John, let's play again." And that was the moment for me. I was like, I like this kid's temperament. I love that answer. The tennis sucks, but at that point, I was like, I can teach tennis skills all day. This is no problem. And if you are willing to fail and just immediately just say again, like give me more, then
That was the hook.
that was
That was
it.
the hook.
That was all I
Yeah.
needed to know.
Yeah.
And I wasn't at the stage, like, you know, if you were a better player, like you wouldn't have come to me at that time. You would have gone to somebody else. So I knew it was like, well, I'm never going to be the coach that attracts players with a ton of skill. So what am I going to do to be able to make some players of my own? And that was it. And I'm not surprised that, like, Matt, in addition to playing tennis, like he was quite into boxing.
Mm.
And look, Matt's a physical beast.
Yeah.
Like he's a beast. Like he can grind. He doesn't quit. And that was apparent from 10 years old or 9 years old, however old it was at the time. And so that was enough to know that, okay, I can spend some serious time here.
Because I was gonna ask you, what grabbed your attention? Why what motivated you to work with him? Because you were saying like he's weak and this and that.
That was the exact moment.
There's gotta be there's gotta be something, like for me personally as well. Like I need to find, and I'm always looking. It's like, okay, what is really good about this player? What can, you know, help me and help him drive this whole tennis thing and get them to another level? It's so important. So that was for you, that desire, and that's like, okay, I lost. Who cares? Let's do it again. Let's figure out if I can do something better next match. So that's very important. You cannot teach that, can you? Like, have we figured that out yet? Not yet.
I think you can teach it to. I think like it's on a continuum. It's like, yeah, you can develop it more, and I think certain people can advance it more than others as well. And again, I think for me, it comes back down to chemistry. So I think the right people and the right role models have a better chance at helping somebody maximize their potential.
Yeah.
Which is to say that I can do it for some people, but not others. And you can also do it for some people and not others. And some people don't have as far to move along that spectrum as others. At least that's what I think.
Yeah. I believe that a lot of it is parents' job. Value of perseverance. But sometimes, listen, like, that's what's weird, because sometimes there are parents who are not in sport. They are saying, at least we never really were raising him that way or her, and yet they're like one of the most competitive players out there. Like you hear stories like this. But I think in general, it's up to parents to teach the values for that player, to always keep fighting, to make sure that, you know, you're resilient, you're tough, you're hardworking, all that stuff. Of course, the coach can help, but sometimes we get them too late because the character is already established. And in the end, how much time the player is gonna spend with you as opposed to with the parent?
Well, if you're a one-on-one coach, heck of a lot.
If you're, so in that way, you can influence a player a lot. So
one of the trips.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You have an interesting story.
Well, it's not. It's more like a interesting observation. So every time we would travel with players at Tennis Canada for like 3 weeks, a month, we would notice a big change in their behavior, because the only message they heard for pretty much 3 weeks, 4 weeks straight was the coach's feedback, coach's values, coach's way of looking at things. So they absorbed it like a sponge, and you could see that influence, your influence on them, big time. Like you could, it's just like, it's a big change. But when they come home and your regular practice resumes and you get to see them again only like 2-3 hours a day, it's a big change. And they kind of lose that. So for what you were saying, this is absolutely huge. The fact that you were especially living in a different province, like you were like literally like living with that person. And Adriano, I know I have to get him on the show as well.
Yeah.
That would be a very interesting conversation. But he's big on living with his players, because I think because of that, because he really understands the importance of your surrounding, and how big of an influence that will make.
Yeah.
Of course, on top of other things and responsibility, accountability, and many things you can develop when the player is in charge of their own things at home, their chores and all that stuff. So there's a big lesson there. But apart from that, I think it's more.
So what I was going to add to that
right?
is when the first trip we did during the pandemic to BC, and we stayed at my friend's house, was the goal was like tennis, but it was also, I was also trying to tap into like the psychology of some of the bigger characteristics and qualities that you're going to need as a player or that I felt were going to be really valuable. And I have a group of friends on the West Coast that I feel they really embody some like really valuable characteristics of athletes and people. And I thought it was important that in a moment, in a period of time in the world where we were very isolated, I thought it would be very important to, and Matt had been like quite isolated in his life up to that point where, when you play that much tennis, you just spend a lot of time around the same people. And, you're missing birthday parties. You don't really have friends at school. So like if you're in a group of 4 or 8, like that's really your social network.
Yeah.
And so we went out there and we would train for the morning or the afternoon, and then we would do some kind of like activity where it was like, okay, well, we're going to go rock climbing like this afternoon. And I remember going to the wall, and I have a picture of Matt up there too. And I remember him going like halfway up, and I could tell he was scared. Totally safe, but I could tell he was scared. And he's like, yeah, I'm ready to come down. And my friend Zach, not the tennis coach, well, a different tennis coach, Zach at the time, Zach Johnson, was belaying him or holding the rope. And Matt's like, yeah, I'm ready to come down. And Zach just sat back and said, nope. He said, you can rest as long as you want, but you're not coming down yet. And it might have taken him half an hour to get up this thing. And it was quite difficult. But, he did. And, you could just see like the sense of accomplishment and the pride for pushing through that. And have a group of people like below you that were relaxed and supportive. I would hope made a difference. I remember one day we went ocean kayaking in like a crazy windstorm. It was like really difficult to have cold water spraying in your face for hours. I asked him, what's one thing you'd like to do that like you've never done before, you think you wouldn't be able to? He's like, I'd love to go like mountain biking, like actually mountain biking. I was like, all right, I'll set it up.
Yeah, well, let's do it.
So we did. I mean, I've never seen a kid go off like roll over the handlebars over the front of the bike so many times. Like I was a little bit worried because he told me
he loved it.
He told me he could ride a bike, but like he has to go mountain biking. That's a different thing. And then one of my friends, he's a national level Taekwondo coach. Like he'd be like the equivalent of like what we are in tennis, but in Taekwondo. And so I exchanged and said, hey, I'm gonna teach your 3-year-old a tennis lesson, but you have to give us a Taekwondo lesson. So so we did that. And so I just tried to find a lot of different experiences. And then we just like hung out with people that have really cool stories that, kind of came from nothing. And I think my hope was that it would shed light on, like, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and that like these people work really hard, but they're also not, and they're definitely obsessed with their craft, but it's not so like all consuming. It's like we can come meet by the fire, like by the river for a fire, and kind of share stories and have a good time. And we're not in competition with each other.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely necessary that this message is spread as widely as possible, because I believe I'm big on this, that yes, we want to be great and our kids, our players, to be great players, but it's so important that they remain to be kids and they still have their childhood, with things like you were saying, just that mountain biking, and they still have time to socialize with their friends, and they still have some time to just be people. They're not robots. Like, it just blows my mind sometimes that like a kid would not have a freaking day off, like from tennis. It's still happening. And I ask a parent, like, when is your day off? Do you have day offs? It's like, yeah, like I'm free on Friday and on Saturday. Like, so why the hell you're making your 10-year-old have 7 days a week with no day off? Like, are you serious? And sometimes it makes them think, sometimes it doesn't, but this is huge what you were just saying. Like, that thing alone stays with him regardless where tennis takes him, regardless. And that builds his character, and that makes him, really appreciate life, because for moments like this that you created for him. And I can guarantee you, like 50 years from now, he's going to remember that. Like 100%.
Well, I hope so. And I hope, even if it doesn't, I hope that it is impacted him positively, whether he's aware or not. Because as much as I was like drawn to his temperament and personality when we first met, I'm like really, really proud of who he's become at this point. I really look forward to continuing to see what he does with his life from this point on. And I think that's a really cool part about being coaching. Well, we don't talk every day now, we still talk, and he's moved out of the country now. That's one of the reasons why we're not still working together. And I really enjoyed seeing him when he came back into town last summer, and I hope that we continue to have some kind of relationship, because I'm just like really proud of him, and I think he's just like a good person.
Yeah, that's really cool to have a relationship like this, like when you just can hang out with the player you coached and just like, get like that jerk chicken or like whatever, ice cream or whatever. It's just to kind of like chill and, hey, how's life?
And how often is it that like the player at the end is like, doesn't want to talk to like the coach at all?
Yeah, that's true.
That's, I'd say, probably more common than not.
Yeah, that's very true. John, I've had a blast.
Me too.
It was truly great. Listen, 1 hour, 8 minutes. I'm looking at the timer. Didn't feel like it at all.
No.
I feel like there's definitely has to be a part 2, because there's so many things that I really want to talk to you, but I want to respect your time. And listen, thanks a lot for sharing all of this with us. That was awesome to hear.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Of course, man. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You as well.
More great players. Enjoy some of that jerk chicken near your house for me, please.
Hey, congrats on your new your new position. Looking like super forward to seeing what happens in the coming years. There it is. Premier racket.
That's it. Yeah, man. Thanks a lot. We'll stay in touch.
Sounds good. Talk to you later, Bogdan.